outlining what he meant. As I read through what he sent, I felt my heart rise up into my throat. So be warned. Like R said, the information is shocking, and I don't know how you'll respond to it or if you'll think it's true. Truthfully, I'm still not sure myself, but I do believe that every American deserves to know what was in that email, so I'm going to share it with you. All I ask is that you keep an open mind, because whether or not you believe R's interpretation of what's to follow, I believe it points the way to an even more specific picture of what's to come. And it makes clear the best way to protect your family. Are you ready? Here's what R sent me. First, he told me about a 2010 document published by the Rockefeller Foundation with the innocent-seeming title, Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. It's since been scrubbed from many parts of the internet. If you can find a copy of it, you'll see that inside is a 54-page document where a group of global elites outlined scenarios for what might happen over the next 20 years. The scenarios begin to look suspicious. Again, I'm not saying any of this is some kind of a conspiracy, but the coincidences are at least enough to make you think.
You see, the 2010 Rockefeller paper begins by describing how even locally, normally bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers.
It continues, noting how leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets, even leading some countries to develop a form of biometric IDs for all citizens. Now, as strange as this all seems, it could just be a well-meaning scenarios of what could happen in a public health crisis. But that's when things get weird.
On page 34 of the document, it notes how a once-in-a-millennium natural disaster, one blamed on climate change, would hit parts of China and put enormous pressure on the already overstressed global economy.
It explains how massive humanitarian relief efforts would simply run out of resources.
And then it describes the oddest scenarios yet, noting how the U.S. would pull out of Afghanistan where, quote, the resurgent Taliban seize power once again. When I read this, the hair on my neck stood up.
How could a 2010 document align so closely to events we see today? One after the other. Empty shops, mandatory mask wearing, Taliban control of Afghanistan. What were the odds of that? I didn't know, but as I read the next few lines, the coincidences became even more unbelievable.
What followed were three specific scenarios. First, there would be global food and resource shortages caused by severe economic and climate stresses.
Then, soaring food prices would bring low-level conflict in resource-rich parts of the developing world, order rapidly disintegrating, and safety nets evaporating. The outcome? Violence and crime grew more rampant. And finally, nations raised trade barriers in order to protect their domestic sectors against imports and reduce exports of agricultural produce and other commodities. The global coordination and interconnectedness was tenuous at best. In other words, the supply chain collapses. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Here was a document from 2010 which seemed to have predicted every major news cycle of the last few years, including the one we're currently living in. I kept reading. Those who couldn't buy their way out of chaos, which was most people, retreated to whatever safety they could find. And after all was said and done, the document concludes, by 2030, the distinction between developed and developing nations no longer seemed particularly descriptive or relevant. In other words, America and every other first world country could sink into third world destitution. And my head was spinning.
I had no idea how something like this could be simulated, but I also didn't know how it could be a coincidence either, with so much detail.
Plus, why would anybody want all of this? R had left me a message at the bottom. Regardless of whether you believe there's some conspiracy at work, or whether you think it's God's judgment on humanity, or just the foolishness of world leaders, the outcome is the same. He continued, personally, I believe it's part of an agenda to seize control. A food shortage that leads the way to the new Great Reset, where meat becomes a luxury, where Gates-backed impossible meat becomes the new normal, and where, in their own words, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Ever wonder why the media seems so eager to push insect meat on us? I believe that this is the reason. a level of control bordering on slavery. But regardless of what you think, the truth is that the great unraveling, as we call it, is likely only months away, and the window of opportunity we have to prepare ourselves is shrinking. I hope the world takes notice. As I finished reading, I wasn't sure what to think, so I stepped outside to clear my head, watching the clouds from overhead. I felt the same sense of heaviness again. Walking past all my neighbors' houses, I wondered how long they would survive if this crisis were to hit. 2 weeks? 3 weeks? It started to sprinkle. I tried to warn them before, but this time the need felt even more urgent. Not to get dramatic, but it almost felt like the last days of Noah, right before the skies ripped open and flooded the whole world. But despite how bad everything appeared, and as strange as it may sound, as I continued walking, I began to feel hope. The rain fell heavier. I hadn't been in church in a long time, but I could remember the voice of my grandmother telling me how God always left a remnant of his people, how light always shines the brightest in darkness, how good beats evil. So as nightmarish as everything seemed bad, I knew there was still hope. I knew there was still time to save others. It started pouring, so I ran back home, this time filled with even more determination. When I got back, I wrote R a response. I told him that I needed his help, not only a way to prepare my own family, but also a way to help others before it was too late. A few hours later, he sent me a reply. He told me to meet him tomorrow in the parking lot of our local grocery store. He told me to come alone and to leave my cell phone in the car. So the next day, I showed up, followed his instructions, and waited. Almost a half hour went by before I started getting ready to leave. That's when a white pickup pulled up beside me, and I heard a gruff voice telling me to get in. It was R. He had me tie a bandana around my eyes to protect the location of his ranch. And we drove for what must have been about 25 minutes. When we finally arrived at his ranch, I could tell that we were in the middle of nowhere. R introduced himself as Ray, and he told me his story of how he'd grown up in rural West Virginia, trapping and fishing and hunting. He told me how he used to be an Eagle Scout, and about his experience serving in the military as Special Forces. Survival was encoded into his DNA. But as he began watching the direction of the world, he realized how many people would be caught if things went from bad to worse. He knew he wanted to do his part to protect as many innocent lives as possible. But Ray was gruff, with a grizzled white beard, leathery skin, and the piercing eyes of someone who's seen things that other people could only imagine. Now, I'm no good at talking, he told me, but when I saw you in that meeting, I knew that you could be my voice. When I asked Ray what message he wanted me to share, he explained that most people go about prepping in all the wrong way. Yes, stored food is essential, but it doesn't do much good if you have to get up and evacuate, he said, and it will only last you a short while. What people really need, he explained, is never-ending supply of fresh, vitamin-rich food. Their personal Garden of Eden they can carry with them wherever they go. When I asked him what he had in mind, he began showing me around his ranch, and he introduced me to something he called an aquaponics system. This is step one, he said. Now, if you've never heard of aquaponics before, here's the lowdown on it. See, aquaponics is the exact pocket-sized Garden of Eden that people need, where fish and plants sustain each other in an almost perfect balance. It has two parts, one filled with live fish and the other a vegetable garden. The plants purify the water for the fish, while the fish do all the hard work for you, fertilizing the plants with their waste. That way you get tasty fish and juicy vegetables, almost without lifting a finger. It's better than simply hydroponics because you don't have to buy tons of plant food to keep your plants alive. Meanwhile, the fish farming is too impractical and dirty on its own. But once you bring the two together in a happy marriage, you get the best from hydroponics and fish farming with none of the drawbacks. It's a win-win scenario for the plants, for the fish, but mostly for you because there's no watering required, no fertilizing, no bending, and actually no real work. The only problem? Most do-it-yourself aquaponics systems are too confusing, complex, and downright worthless, while others you can buy cost upwards of $6,000 or more. But Ray explained that he'd spent years perfecting an unbelievably simple way that anyone can build their own aquaponics for 98% less than it normally costs. Nobody's teaching this stuff the right way, he said. Not on the internet, not in books, and not on YouTube. As far as I can tell, I'm the only one who's perfected this method. But that's just the first part. Ray went on to show me an odd triangular dome structure hidden in his backyard. Apparently, the unique design of this dome allows anyone to grow pounds of juicy tomatoes, bell peppers, and delicious zucchini almost year-round. And all it takes to build is a couple of 2x4s and some plastic sheeting. Its geometric design perfectly reflects sunlight even in cloudy areas. It automatically regulates temperature. And it's so sturdy it won't break in heavy weather. Between these two, you'll have enough food until doomsday, he said. But that's not all. He went on to show me another method to grow 100 pounds of food in just 4 square feet of space, even without sunlight. And he showed me how to fit each piece of his system together perfectly, giving you more food than your family could ever eat, no matter where you live or how much space you have to work with. Guns and ammo are good for protection, he explained, but nothing beats the guy or gal who knows how to make all this stuff. What's inside your head is something nobody can take from you. You can carry it with you everywhere you go. And when shit hits the fan, 99% of the people will have no clue about any of this stuff, making you an irreplaceable asset to anybody. I began to realize what Ray was showing me was the closest thing to total freedom, protecting me from skyrocketing food prices and giving my family and I the peace of mind that we will survive any food crisis. And it's something that could keep you safe no matter what catastrophe comes your way. So over the next 3 days, I took careful notes of every detail of Ray's system. I made him outline it all very simply, so simple that a 10-year-old could follow the instructions. Everything had to be easy enough that an 80-year-old couple or a single mom could put it all together. And we brainstormed ways to keep all of the supplies cheap or even free. After what felt like an eternity, I finally had all the details of his system written down. So I rushed back home and carefully typed them up. When I was finished, I sent a copy to one of my friends, Joseph, who was one of the only people who took my advice at the PTO meeting. Here's what he said about it. At first, I wasn't sure this would be as easy as you made it sound, but damn, it only took me like a few hours to put it all together. Whoever came up with this stuff is a genius. He told me that he even shared it with his mother-in-law who lives in Boston. Here's what she told him. As someone who lives in the city, I've become increasingly worried about what's going on in the world. This makes me feel safe. I know I'll have plenty of food now. Soon, I had people emailing me left and right asking for a copy. I knew then that it was time to put this out into the world. A complete system that makes you feel totally safe and free from worry of major food crisis.
I call it the Food Freedom System.
It's the simplest, most affordable, and most complete system that you'll find anywhere to prepare you for 5, 10, or even 20 years completely off the grid. It will give instant access to tons of fresh, vitamin-rich food all year round, making you the most key player in the disaster that's to come. The Food Freedom System is incredibly easy to set up once you follow the step-by-step blueprint I've laid out for you. It doesn't require a lot of space, so you can use it whether you live in the cities, the suburbs, or countryside. In fact, just one piece of this system allows you to grow 100 pounds of food in just 4 square feet, even without sunlight. The Food Freedom System will work for anybody, whether you're 80 years old, a single widow, or a lifelong city dweller brand new on your prepper journey. Ray and I wanted something that would cut through all the BS and information overload that leaves so many people feeling overwhelmed, which is exactly why we designed our system to contain everything you need to survive any food crisis. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, and no matter how few dollars you have to invest in preparation.
That's just one reason why so many people are raving about it.
I put this system together in 2 hours. For each step, it was like you were right there with me, helping me. I didn't think I'd be able to do this, but it was surprisingly easy. I cannot overstate how good it feels to know that my family's food security is taken care of. The Food Freedom System gives me that security, and I'm so happy. Hands down, the easiest to understand and follow aquaponics guide I've ever seen. Inside, you'll find easy-to-follow videos which guide you along every step of the process, leaving no detail out, and using the simplest non-technical language possible. Heck, simply watching this material will make you more prepared than 99% of the rest of the world. So if you know how to press a button, then you can take full advantage of the Food Freedom System. Now, let me tell you exactly what you get inside. First, you get the step-by-step insider details for how to set up your own do-it-yourself aquaponics blueprint. This is the same method Ray's perfected over the last 10 years, and it's the easiest way to turn just a few dollars into a self-sustaining ecosystem which feeds your family fresh fish and pounds of produce on autopilot. When he first showed it to me, I knew I'd stumbled into a literal gold mine. This system is that amazing. One, you hardly need any water. This is obviously important because if the public water system goes down or an extended heat wave dries up all your wells, you want as much water as possible to go towards quenching your family's thirst. That's why this system is so great, because it uses only 10% of the water used in conventional gardening, and the water is actually recycled and automatically filtered for you. So the only water you lose is through evaporation. 2, the aquaponics blueprint you get in the Food Freedom System is probably the only way to grow food in colder areas like New England, which means you'll have plenty of food, even in the middle of winter. 3, aquaponics requires about half the space of traditional gardening. It was actually invented by Palestinians who used the system on their rooftops in war-torn areas. So you don't even need a backyard to use it. Heck, you can use this system in your basement if you want. Plus, using less space means it's easier to protect this system from looters or nosy neighbors you don't want knowing your plans. Finally, you don't need any fertilizer. Just feed the fish, and the fish will fertilize the plants. That's the magic of the system. All you have to do is grab some fresh fish and harvest vegetables for about 5 minutes, and you have nutrient-rich food for your family, while everyone else is out burning calories and dumpster diving, scavenging, or trying to hunt for game. You're sitting back and letting your miniature food factory do all the work for you. That's pretty cool, right? Plus, there's no bending required to use aquaponics. Seriously, since you grow your vegetables in raised beds, you don't have to worry about straining your back each day. And setting up the aquaponics system couldn't be easier. Ray refined his method over 10 years, spending his sweat and literal tears to see it finally work. But by following his foolproof shortcut, you won't waste any time. Like I said, we'll show you how to build this system for less than 2% of what it typically costs to buy from retailers. And you won't have to use the typical $4,000 fish tank that most aquaponics systems tell you to use. Instead, I'll show you the $75 alternative, something you can get even for free sometimes. When I built this system, my total cost came out to be $190, which included $40 for a pair of extra hands and $75 on that part that I could have probably gotten for free. Not bad for something that can feed your whole family. In fact, your aquaponics system could actually save you money. See, unlike survival food, you don't have to wait for a crisis in order to enjoy aquaponics. Countless families are using it right now to grow ripe, juicy tomatoes, fresh radishes, broccoli, and even carrots. Heck, you can even grow strawberries in winter if you know the special technique we'll share inside the blueprint. Given just how toxic so many of our crops have become, even organic ones, most families feel safer eating food they grow at home. Plus, they love how good the fresh produce tastes. But that's just one part of what you get inside the Food Freedom System. Because I'm also going to give you the step-by-step blueprint you need to grow your own Geodome Garden of Eden greenhouse. This greenhouse allows you to grow way more fresh fruits and vegetables almost year-round using nothing but some screws, cheap lumber, and plastic sheeting. The secret is in the design. See, this geodome is made up of a web of little triangles, making it the most stable structure you can build, and making it able to withstand even the heaviest wind, snow, and hail. That's just one reason why FEMA uses the design to construct its own disaster-proof structures.
But even though this design is often described as a miracle of engineering, it's actually surprisingly easy to put together with the blueprint I'm going to give you.
In fact, my kids and I had a blast putting our own together. The Geodome greenhouse allows you to catch every precious sunbeam that hits your yard, which is essential in most parts of the country. Plus, it conserves heat better than normal greenhouses, which is just another reason why it allows you to extend the growing season. And since these domes are completely freestanding, you don't need any permits. You don't need to set any foundation. And you can even move it across short distances, just like with the aquaponics system I mentioned earlier. Every step is laid out for you in simple detail, and in language so easy a 12-year-old could follow it. And look, I get it. One frequent comment that Ray and I get goes something like this: Henry, I like what you're doing, but all this just sounds too good to be true. Am I really able to build all this, even if I'm 70, and even if I'm not very handy with tools? The short answer is yes. Everything you get inside the Food Freedom System is simple, quick, and easy to use. Sure, there's some cutting to do, and you might want to have someone help you fill the growing beds, but the truth is that you don't have to build anything yourself if you don't want to. I've heard plenty of stories from people who paid $40 to someone for a helping hand, but most people find that they actually enjoy the time spent outside, showing their kids new skills, feeding and catching fish, and harvesting their own fresh fruits and vegetables. Plus, like I said earlier, simply having the Food Freedom System and going through it once will put you ahead of 99% of people who have zero clue about any of this stuff. Finally, you're going to get Ray's 33 Essentials to Survival. In this short guide, Ray boils down his decades of survival experience into the absolute essentials he believes every man and woman needs to know in order to survive